Okay, we're sort of bang on time to begin. We've only got 45 minutes scheduled today, so I think we might kick off with all of our intros and agenda, and people can keep joining as we do that. So thank you so much for joining everyone on your Friday, hopefully lunchtime. You can sit back and relax for an hour. Um, we'll do some intros in a second, but just very quickly, just some housekeeping. Hopefully you've all managed your audio connection okay. We do have a chat and a Q&A available. We definitely love comments and thoughts and questions, so please feel free to use especially the Q&A option as you can upvote other people's questions, and we're going to try and answer some of them live in the chat, but we will certainly have a question time at the end. So submit any questions you like and we should hopefully get to them. If not, we will follow up with you separately afterwards. And this webinar is being recorded, so we'll circulate the recording afterwards to everyone that attended and everyone that registered, and you'll be able to pass it on to colleagues or friends who you think might be interested. Fantastic. Okay, so again, thanks for joining. We've got a pretty full 45 minutes today. I do fear we may run over. So we'll, circulate the recording if you have a hard finish at 1:15. I've got Jared and Luke joining me, and I'll let them do some intros in a second. But first up, we're going to hear from Jared. He's a long-time Giraffe user. His company, Unique Urban, also use Giraffe with some of their clients and I was going to say customers. It's a very Giraffe word, but some of his clients. So he's going to talk us through some of those use cases about how he's done some, I guess, digital planning workflows using tools like Giraffe. Then Luke and I are going to jump into the actual product and show you what it does, how it works, and some very high-level planning workflows to hopefully give you a bit of a flavour for the kinds of things that Giraffe can do. Then we'll take some questions, and then we've got a couple of very quick announcements at the end about Giraffe Academy. So I'll hand over to Luke to introduce himself and say hello.
Thanks, Lucy. So my name is Luke Bassett. I'm a solutions consultant at Giraffe, and I've got an extensive history working across local and state government, and most recently been working on digital solutions for town planning. And yeah, great to be here today. And I'll pass across to Jared.
Thanks, Luke. Also excited to be here today. So my name's Jared Phillips. I'm the Director and Urban Design Lead at Unique Urban. And as Lucy mentioned, I'll be here today to share some of my experience using Giraffe, particularly in a local government setting across various different projects that we've been involved in over the last few years. And look forward to taking you through that today.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Luke. And I forgot to do my own intro. I'm, for anyone I haven't met, I'm Lucy Booth, one of the co-founders of Giraffe. I'm a strategic planner by background and spent about 12 years in the private sector working on lots of different types of planning projects. And we basically got a bit frustrated with the products that were in the market and having to string together lots of different software packages. So we decided to make the one that we wanted to use in everyday practice. So yes, that's me. Jared, I'll start rolling through your slides. You just let me know when I need to move on to the next one. But before we do that, there's a couple of people on the call who are not Giraffe users. So I just wanted to give you a very quick background. We are a software business. We were founded in Sydney in 2017 by an architect, a planner, a software engineer, and an electrical engineer. We basically wanted to become the operating system for cities, so for planning, place, and property. That means that we are sort of like the baseline, digital thread that brings together all your workflows across property and planning. The really simple way to think about Giraffe is that we are a map, pencil, and calculator. We're obviously a 3D geospatial map that you can overlay layers and data on. We have some great design tools which are very simple to use. And we have some very great analytics tools like a calculator, very simple Excel, but also some, I guess, spatial and qualitative analytics that can be done as well. And we have all sorts of customers, planners, architects, engineers, property developers, lots of government customers. So that's us. And I'll hand over to you, Jared.
Thanks, Lucy. So just a little bit about Unique Urban briefly before I start. So we are a small emerging urban design practice that was founded in 2022. And a large majority of our clients are local government. And the way that we operate is both as an in-house contractor that's engaged by council, by local government, and also as part of larger multidisciplinary consultant teams that are engaged by council. So lots of experience in local government, and prior to setting up Unique Urban, had a fairly extensive stint in local government as well, up on the Central Coast, which was a great experience. And some other bits here. So a lot of our work is focused on master planning, structure plans, corridor strategies, design guidelines, and of course 3D modeling and scenario testing utilizing Giraffe. And the final one there, our extensive experience using Giraffe across multiple local government projects throughout New South Wales is something that I'll sort of touch on today, and just my experience around that, just to add value to how great the program has been in a lot of recent scenarios and situations that local governments in New South Wales have experienced. So touching on our experience more specifically with Giraffe, so I had the opportunity to work with a couple of councils in contract capacity, which meant being embedded in strategic planning teams, which was an unreal opportunity and still ongoing to this day. So one council in particular focused on how to respond to the introduction of the transport-oriented development set, which some of you may be aware of on the call today. And another council's looking at how to respond to the low and mid-rise planning reforms, also referred to as LMR. Giraffe has been an absolutely integral tool in both of these situations, particularly when it comes to modelling, testing alternative urban design development scenarios. It really has been a powerful tool that allows that scenario testing to take place internally within that local government setting. And what it does is, in my third point there, it's a great tool in the sense of simplifying data. So a big part of urban design is wanting to understand our cities, places, suburbs, wherever we're working, and data allows us to do that. And using a platform like Giraffe has really opened the doors to data-driven planning and urban design, and utilising GIS spatial data, as well as other forms of data like population, etc. So it really strengthens in urban design what we call the evidence base, and that it clearly articulates. A former professor of mine at university always said, "So what? You know, why are you making those particular design decisions in your urban design response, and how you're responding to a particular site, place, town, city, whatever scale we're working at." So it's been a really fantastic tool to answer the so what and to strengthen that evidence base. It's also a great collaborative tool. So it really has facilitated, in my experience, the internal interaction and knowledge sharing across teams throughout the sort of wider organisation in a local government setting. So yeah, it's been great to be able to utilise Giraffe and then apply it in local government setting. And as you can see, particularly in response to the TODCEP and the LMR, it's been a great tool to really come up with some really solid evidence-based planning that clearly articulates what it is that we're trying to achieve, but also enables us to produce some really outstanding solutions from an urban design perspective. So just touching on this quickly, again, my personal view of why I think it's important for local government in particular, and just sharing this based on my experience, it's really that it really revolves around these four things. So speed, clarity, innovation, and collaboration. So when we talk about workflows, workflows is sort of talking to the process that we undertake to I guess, arrive at a particular solution or a final solution. And Giraffe really simplifies that pathway to getting to that final solution. And that's been really, really fantastic, being able to have a single go-to program, if you like, that allows us to streamline that workflow. It's really been instrumental in enhancing stakeholder engagement and communication, so providing that clarity and being innovative in that regard. It's enabled building that in-house urban design and testing capability and expertise within local government urban design teams. It's been really good for that. And I think, as I touched on in my previous slide, it allows us to become more agile and informed about the planning outcomes and urban design outcomes that we're delivering. So just touching on workflows and just going into a bit more detail, noting that the previous slide was a bit of an overview of those sort of things that I've picked up on using Giraffe in a local government setting. So as I mentioned, most projects in the urban design space involve us using multiple systems and software. And you can see on the right there of the screen, I've got a little, very basic little flow chart there. But when we were sort of undertaking a similar exercise of creating a scenario or looking at a place, modelling it, testing it, to then inform planning controls and that overall urban design response. When we were looking at that without Giraffe, we'd obviously have our typical sketch concept design options, which then may go into some sort of spreadsheet form and CAD base, where we're able to take off areas and extract data in that regard. You could also use GIS for that sort of approach. And then that would mean that would then have to be taken in some sort of 3D modeling software. And then those three components, the spreadsheet, the CAD base, and the 3D modeling software, have to consistently be updated to then inform that testing and then that final model output. With Giraffe, it's really like what I see as a three-step process, where you have always starting with that sketch and concept design, urban design, moving into the Giraffe model, bring into that digital space, being able to test it, because all three of those components, the spreadsheet, the two-dimensional base or CAD base is available, and then the 3D option as well is all packaged into one piece of software. And that's been a game changer, in my opinion. And then that sort of leads to our final model once we've gone through that testing process. So it really is an ideal precinct planning, structured planning tool. And it's great for site-specific testing as well, where we want to test those LEP and DCP controls. An example workflow of what that might look like in the real world. So sketch plans, sections, collaborating with others, having those discussions internally within the local government setting, but also this could be applied outside of local government as well. So maybe you would still do some back of the envelope testing. I think that's always something that's required, some rough takeoffs, high-level FSR dwellings calculations. And then once we bring that into the Giraffe modelling space, we can sort of start to fact check some of that back of the envelope testing, refine it, build the model, and start inputting data, so height, FSR, GFA, in the experiences I've been involved in, but also most importantly, establishing those assumptions. And then we sort of end up testing that over and over again. So it's very easy to then sort of manipulate the model, test it, look at different outputs. And then that leads us to the creation of the final scenario. So as I mentioned, building in-house capability, it's been fantastic. So really enabling or creating a better understanding of how that sort of relationship between height and FSR. I think sometimes in the planning and urban design world, there's a bit of disconnect between those two sorts of things, and we can then sort of be having to deal with that at the approval stage. And so it helps to sort of get that height and FSR relationship via testing sorted up front. Speeds up the project iteration, and most importantly, it encourages that evidence-based data-informed, planning and urban design decision making. So that evidence-based side of it and utilising data is really important. That's where Giraffe has been a great tool and asset to be able to pull all that data together and analyse it in a 3D space. Because of the visual nature of Giraffe, It's also an excellent communication tool. So that's meant that we haven't, in some circumstances, had to sort of go back into another software to create some nice visuals. We've been able to produce those in Giraffe as well. And that's been extremely powerful, and also sort of sharing model in presentations and meetings has been great as well, and flicking through those different scenarios and concepts. It simplifies complex data, it makes it easier to understand, and I think as a user it makes it easier to use or to sort of process that data. And then the big one there is that then builds trust and transparency, in my opinion, which helps with that overall decision making process. So just here, some field notes, just some examples where I've been involved at Ku-ring-gai and currently at Blacktown. So at Ku-ring-gai, I really assisted with the TODCEP there and the development of alternative scenarios and establishing those overarching dwelling targets, which was great. It enabled the testing of FSRs and building heights to estimate those potential dwelling yields for each of the centres, but then for the entire corridor. So then you can look at it as a corridor relationship or a corridor strategy, and balancing those dwelling yields, and based on then variables around, for Ku-ring-gai, it's heritage conservation area, and heritage items is a really significant one, which is obviously then leads on to important character, which is specific to Ku-ring-gai. So that was a big thing and enabled us to balance that and test that. And then it was used as well for some technical site testing as well, to test the controls and develop some structure plans and all those sorts of things. So that was a really good experience. And then the final one there at Blacktown, it's been great as an interactive tool to understand different planning layers and allowing people to turn layers on and off and visually see that, and also consider where some opportunities might be from an urban design perspective. It's again facilitated the development of some alternative scenarios. And the final one there, it's just been a great communication tool at this point in time for both internal engagement, community and stakeholder engagement as well. And I'll hand back over to Lucy and Luke. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jared. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight into Giraffe. I'm going to time myself so I stick to my 6-minute limit. I've got 2 examples today. There's a little bit of assumed knowledge in this demo. We're not going to go deep on every part of the functionality here. So if you see something that you're unfamiliar with, absolutely reach out. And Luke and myself, even Jared, will be able to connect and give you a demo or talk about how this could be applied to your local area. I'm going to show 2 very quick examples, but I'm going to try and talk to something that we get asked about a lot here at Giraffe from councils all around Australia, and consultants too, who are often doing work for councils. And that is to try and approximate the existing sort of dwelling or job count, the baseline controls, what the capacity of the existing planning framework is, and then doing like a future scenario. I've picked a location in South Sydney in Sutherland Shire. This is completely hypothetical just for demonstration purposes. And I've done a little bit of pre-work here to show you. So I've got a nice little precinct around the station. I've gone away and looked at a walking catchment. So we've got a 5 and a 10-minute catchment here to see how far you can get. We have a great sort of isochrone tool that does walking, cycling, driving. And I've also done a little bit of context here. So within sort of very close catchment of the station, there's a primary school, a high school, a TAFE, a private hospital, and a really great green corridor that is protected. What I'll do is turn on the zoning just so we can look at what's happening around here. We can see with the controls, just turn them down a little bit more. We've got a local centre here along Gymea Bay Road, and then some residential stuff directly behind it that has a slightly or quite a higher density in terms of the zoning controls. So the first thing that I wanted to do was basically try and replicate the controls of this centre. I have created the boundaries of this centre. I don't know, how it's necessarily thought about down there. And I've called it north and south just to give it a little bit of variety in the numbers. I'm going to turn the context off because we don't necessarily need to quantify the floor space of the school or the commuter car park up near the station. But you can see pretty clearly now I've got some envelopes that try to approximate the built form controls. So for anyone who's not based in New South Wales, our planning framework here has like a zone, a maximum floor space ratio, or rather a target floor space ratio, and a maximum height of building controls. And you sort of are triangulating the three of them to come up with generally an envelope. When I hand over to Luke, he's going to start looking very specifically at sites and how that is applied at a site level or to a number of sites that are parceled together. But this is looking a little bit more generally in a strategic sense. Now, these envelopes here are very basic. What we have actually done is just drawn some blocks, some rectangles that try to sort of hug the existing parcel boundaries for the properties that make up those zones. And you can see over on the right-hand side here, and I hope this is large enough for people to see, but we're starting to count some GFA. So ultimately, you create these built form controls to understand the gross floor area or the building area that can potentially be filled then with land uses, jobs and dwellings and things like that. The way that Giraffe works is that we have the concept of usages, and I've made a little reference library here that I just want to show you. And generally, when we onboard a team, we would help you try and figure out how to create a library of these usages or typologies that begin to replicate your planning framework. So this is, again, just a very typical hypothetical one. These blocks represent, especially these sort of pink and red ones at the front, represent residential land uses broadly in New South Wales. I'll just pick on the R3 one, which is a medium density residential usage. And I'm just going to show you this little screen here. And the best way to think about this is that there's a couple of controls here that are interesting. So what we've done is given it a height, which would try to replicate the maximum height. We've given it 16 meters, that's roughly 6 stories. And we have a floor to floor height that is defined, but not used in this model. It's more just to sort of document assumptions. Down the bottom here, we have some analytics, some I guess, assumptions that we use to calculate the numbers. So we're not worried about CapEx. Luke's going to talk a little bit about actual feasibility later. This is a residential land use, so it doesn't have any jobs, but it does have some dwellings. We've made a generic dwelling size of 100 square meters per apartment. That sort of accounts for anything from a studio up to a 3-bed and in between. So it's just an average size. You can absolutely control this yourself. We then have the concept of ratio of employment or ratio of residential. And we do this so that when you might have a mixed use typology, you can start saying maybe 30% of the floor space is for employment related uses and then 70% is residential, something like that. This one is purely residential. So it's 1 for 100% and 0 for employment. We then also have a floor space ratio target of 1.2. That is localized for this part of the world. It might be different for an R3 zone elsewhere, and that is totally up to the user to control. And then we also have a building coverage here because generally these larger typologies or land uses do not have like 0 lot boundaries. The buildings are set back to accommodate for hard space, softscape, parking, things like that. So all of these assumptions here are 100% controlled by the users. And I think this is really important because we're looking at a sort of very New South Wales centric planning framework here, but the way that we do the calculation is actually quite generic and very easily to manipulate for your planning framework or your part of the world. So just wanted to call that out here. This reference library then just becomes something that you can refer to or like eyedrop to apply a land use as you need it. So let's quickly head back to, I'm already almost at time, but we'll just head back to the center here and just show you that what we're doing here is some pretty simple calculations. I'm taking the area of what I have drawn, timesing it by its building coverage to reduce that area to potentially 70% or something like that, and timesing it by the floor space ratio. We're breaking that up to get a mix of residential or employment, and then we're dropping some dwellings and jobs out of that. I'm just going to very quickly draw another little box here on what is a commuter car park at the moment. And let's just assume we're going to put potentially a mixed use development here. MU1. And you can see if you are watching carefully, I'll go undo the numbers over on the right-hand side here change as we assign a usage. And so it immediately starts counting. And as we edit that box and move it around, so we might reduce it or increase it, maybe introduce some open space at the front there, we start changing that, that mix of GFA. So it's a very dynamic model. So as Jared was saying, using this to iterate and start coming up with scenarios is very straightforward once you understand how to draw. I'm going to show one more thing. I'm already a minute over time, but that's okay. I've got a little precinct just to the right of that catchment. This is very small and simple. The idea here is that lots and lots of people come to us and say, I want to know what capacity my existing planning controls have so I can figure out what to upzone or rezone. What we've done here is replicate the existing dwellings, and we've done a manual override here to try and count them. If you have some data, you can sort of BYO data into the platform very easily to try and count it. But we are looking at roughly 68 dwellings in here. That may not be correct. And we've got a little bit of open space as per the zoning. What I'm going to do now is turn off my existing dwellings and try and create a baseline one. So this has got an R3 zoning on it, and I'm going to be a bit fast here. I wouldn't normally recommend drawing this way, but we're just going to very quickly replicate roughly the area that's available. And again, over here. And we're just going to grab those two uses, the two polygons, sorry, and apply an R3 land use. And as soon as I do that, based on the calculation that I have over here, we're seeing that that is potentially 250 dwellings that could be, if built to full capacity, available here. I'll then very quickly grab these. I'm just copying and pasting sort of the normal sort of thing. And if I change those to R4, we then greatly increase the density. And you can see that we're adding now under the future dwelling. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the dog. Increase that to 570. So like I showed you, there's lots of assumptions to play with, but it's a very nice way of structuring and documenting those assumptions and then applying them to land uses very quickly and easily. So what I'll do now is stop sharing my screen and hand over to Luke. And maybe Luke, while you're grabbing the screen, what he's going to demonstrate is how we can move from this kind of block massing envelope based analysis through to very specific site feasibility. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, so that's great to provide an intro on how we can do broad zoning analysis, but a lot of the time we also want to have a look at actual specific controls. In New South Wales, it's called DCP. In Victoria, where I'm from, it's more about local planning provisions around, you know, heights and setbacks and etc. So, and all of that was going to have like an overall impact on the particular yields on site, as well as impact some of the livability of the areas. So we've got a range of tools which can support that. And one of those in particular is our computational envelopes. And these envelopes allow us to design out the urban controls, like in high detail, from a setback. And they're really easy to use. You can make them as really complex, but the ultimate aim really is to simulate the urban form. So not only can I adjust the envelopes, but I can also then fill those with built form. So you can see the envelope is just like the purple shell. You can see it's got some articulation for the street walls, side setbacks. We can actually control that, and it's actually dynamic as well. So I can change this on site, and that will actually update in real time. So this is looking at New South Wales for the LMR policy extents, and I have actually filled this with built form to calculate yield. But equally, it's applicable in Victoria as well. We can do the same thing if we're looking at your neighbourhood centres, activity centres, or other residential regions. And of course, it's applicable across anywhere that has built form controls. But what I want to do today is not necessarily just look at the overall controls. What will be good is actually to look at some examples of built form typologies which you want to deliver on site, and that not necessarily be the overall controls. We're flipping it. So can we actually fit urban design typologies, built form typologies within the controls? And I've actually referenced some of these from a Victorian council who've got this great document about better apartment guidelines, and they've proposed a range of different typologies which fit on site. Sorry, a bit of a preview. So I have implemented the garden form. In this case, it actually looks like it fits rather well within the existing framework. And another one, which is this is the block model, which more supports like a tower residential on top with a like a base like at the bottom, which may be used for commercial or for retail. And so we can actually like program those in. So at the moment, I've got, if I just click on this one, we've got usage fields, which we can put inside. At the moment, it's retail and commercial. I can delete some of those. Let's delete the commercial as well. And so now it's just going to go for full residential, but I might want to make the bottom car park or retail, and we can even change the mixes in here. And so this isn't necessarily just for visual impact. We can have a look at the overall yield that it's delivering in terms of the amount of apartment space, the amount of retail space, and any of the usage typologies which we want to assess. And on top of that, we can then actually have a look at the solar characteristics for this site as well. So we've got this in two flavors. We can have a look at the shadow it's casting. Like as we can see, this is going to be quite an upzone in comparison to some of the local typologies, and we can look at the impact. So that's at time of the year as well as time of the day. But on top of that, we can look at sunlight characteristics as well. So we can plot out areas we want to assess and then look at particular seasons and times of the day to determine like overall how much light is that facade getting, and therefore the apartments within, as well as the landscape around. Great, let me just turn that off. So these computational envelopes can be applied like on site and throughout like an entire district, and we can analyze like what the overall urban form and whether our typologies will fit. Now, Giraffe itself has quite a fantastic analytics tab, which Lucy was showing before, and these are all really configurable to do particular types of studies. So in this case, we can look at what's the overall types of yield, and you can see I've got a few different scenarios here. So let's turn on all of my buildings here. And I can then analyze all of my different options side by side to determine like what is the yield in terms of residential space, retail, in terms of overall floor area, and it can even be individual dwellings as well. Now, maybe I want to have a look at the LMR controls and apply those to site, but then consider some apartment design considerations. So I've got another project, which I'll just flip to here. The LMR controls themselves wouldn't necessarily talk about the livability of the apartments, such as floor plate sizes and light access. So that's something which you may require to do a more intensive design. And we may want to actually design the building and the landscape to determine like whether it would completely fit. So we've done that in this case. And we've Giraffe's got some great tools like where we can computationally even design envelopes which have like unit mixes, and that then helps you validate like that your floor plate sizes and urban urban characteristics are realistic for your massing. And so then what we can do is we can then have a look at different scenarios which we may be able to fit on site. And that is from a yield perspective. If I open up my analytics again, we can have a look at the overall floor space yield. But on top of that, we can have a look at the financials and determine whether this is going to be a feasible project to deliver. And we've got some default financial model templates, which we can support councils to set up, where we can plug in local development costs, localized sales for different apartment types or different, such as like retail floor space or commercial floor space, which we can plug in and then determine like overall whether our preferred urban typologies are feasible. Apologies. feasible or actually financially viable. So on that, I might just pass back to Lucy, who will do some announcements.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Jared. Before we jump into announcements, so I guess hopefully that gives some of you, I guess, a bit of a taste of the different types of planning workflows that can happen in Giraffe. The strategic stuff that I showed obviously was for a really small area. We have lots of council customers who cover their entire LGA with envelopes and essentially come up with like a digital DCP or a digital set of built form guidelines, and we love working on projects like that. All the way through down to what happens if I implement these controls on a site, as Luke has showed. So what is a feasible design? Is the floor plate deep or wide enough to facilitate, an apartment building? How much might it cost? And all that sort of stuff. One thing we didn't demonstrate, but Jared mentioned, is that Giraffe is very collaborative. So if you create projects, whether they're for a single site or the whole LGA, you can absolutely invite your team in and you can work very collaboratively together. There's lots of different types of permissioning. So you can invite your director and not let them edit, or you can bring in all your designers and you can all be playing around together on different parts of the model at the same time. So we did have some time left for questions before we do announcements, and everyone's been extremely polite and we've had not one question, but I can see Oksana has raised her hand. So if you're able to unmute yourself, please go ahead. Don't know if we've given you the ability to do that. So if you had a question, perhaps drop it in the question Q&A box and we can answer it. But if it was an accidental hand, I'll just say hello. But yeah, no questions at all, which means we obviously didn't leave any gaps, left nothing to the imagination. So maybe I'll jump into announcements and give anyone some time to drop something in the question box. We've got lots of different types of resources available, as I think many of you may know as existing customers or people who have interfaced with Giraffe before. We have a really great YouTube channel that Adam, Holly, Rob, and the team contribute to constantly. There's lots of interesting training material. We're starting to create content that is a little bit more persona or use case driven. And part of that effort has meant that we have recently kind of formalized our training academy. And the first sort of run of personas that we're looking at are the architect, property developers, and then also local councils. So we've got 2 courses that are already open for registration. The structure of these is that they'll run over sort of 5 or 6 sessions, potentially over, I think, a 2 or 3 week period. So there will be live sessions that will be run by a Giraffe team member or 2 or 3 team members. And there's really clear syllabuses. So for example, with the architect, Adam Hogan from our customer success team, who is a registered architect, will be running I think 6 sessions that basically take you from how do I set up a project and drop the appropriate layers in, do my site analysis, a couple of sessions that talk deeply about drawing, and then 2 sessions at the end that talk about analytics, reporting, and pulling out some graphics that you can then integrate into reports. The digital first developer is for property developers, development managers, project managers, etc., who might be trying to do a high level feasibility before it goes out for proper design and DD. One of these academies that we will be releasing next Monday is also for councils. It's aimed at strategic planners really, who are trying to do land use planning. It will be pretty similar to what Luke and I have demoed today. It will start at quite a strategic level, helping to quantify the capacity of the built form controls that exist in your precinct or LGA, all the way through to doing some feasibility testing on 2 or 3 of those sites to understand how realistic the controls are. That one should be announced next week. So if you look at LinkedIn, you should hopefully be able to find that pretty easily. I also just wanted to mention Land IQ. I think there's quite a few people on the call from New South Wales who know about Land IQ. This is a product that's built on top of Giraffe. So if you have a Giraffe license, or rather if you have a Land IQ license, you also are able to use all the Giraffe features. This was developed by Property Development New South Wales, part of the Department of Planning, and it's a strategic land use and evaluation tool. There's lots of fantastic features there. So we've got some QR codes on the screen, so please feel free to scan them for more information. Or you can very easily get in touch with Luke, Jared, or myself to find out more about those programs or how you might want to implement Giraffe in your workflows. And we finally got some questions. So I might stop sharing the screen and we can jump into those. Philip, can topography important to scenario testing? Yes, absolutely. We do have a terrain tool. It's probably worth mentioning that it is generally between sort of 5 to 10 meters between the contours. So it's not sort of, survey accurate, but it's really fantastic at helping understand view analysis, even cut and fill analysis if you have a very steep site. So yes, we do have a terrain and topography tool, and depending on your use case, it should hopefully be very helpful at that sort of strategic urban design planning phase. And
Can I just add to that one, Lucy?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'll just also note that that users can also load in data sets too. So if you've got like your own site-specific contour data set, that can be loaded in the system. Really what we try to do is allow users to bring their own data, and whether that's like data that comes from your state agencies or whether that's data you're pulling in for a specific region that you're doing a study for, you can load that in as GIS files. So that might be your local contours, which you can design around.
Thanks, Luke. Just to answer Hen's question on some features, just to quickly mention the Isochrone and a couple of other apps are available to all users. So what I'm going to show you, I have a lot more than most people, unfortunately, because I'm an admin. But if you click on the plus button underneath your apps, we have quite a few that will be available to you, which includes the Isochrone. There's a great precinct app, an elevation tool, an IFC export, Speckle, like lots and lots of things. Our knowledge base, and maybe Luke, could I ask you to go and find the address for the knowledge base and potentially drop it in the chat? But our knowledge base has a really great list of all the additional apps that are available. So Hen and team, I'd encourage you to go have a look at that. With the financial modeling, that is very simply a template. So we do lots of templates with teams all the time. I think one of the strengths of Giraffe is that you can customize your template. So everyone has a slightly different way of calculating FSR or GFA or doing a full financial model. So we can certainly provide a template, but we'd always recommend that either you review it yourselves and change the inputs, or we can sit with you and guide you through what is sort of a generic assumption and what you might want to localize. But that's part of the analytics template. So Hens, just send me an email and we can get a session set up for that. And can we have a separate category to calculate underground FSR? Yes, absolutely. Back to my earlier point about Giraffe, very simply just being like a map and a pen and a calculator. If you very simply draw any shape in Giraffe, it is just calculating areas. We do have some basement typologies. We do not visualize underground, but you would simply just create a usage based on a land use. We would potentially then change the settings so that it's at underground. It wouldn't be visualized underground, but doesn't matter how many levels deep it was, it would certainly calculate the, I guess, the volume or the number of square meters that would be generated by that land use. So yes. Ravi, how effective is interoperability to a data exchange between? Okay, good question. We have lots and lots of different options for importing and exporting data in Giraffe. Because it is a very simply like a spatial map, it is a projected map, so it's the basic GIS. we allow you to bring in lots of different types of layers. So we have a huge library of data sets. It's a federated data model. So we love Esri feature servers, map servers, all different kinds of layers. Things that we can import really easily are vector data, so shape files or GeoJSONs, as well as DWGs, as long as they are projected, can be brought into Giraffe really easily. You can also drop an image on the map and geolocate it yourself, and then we can connect to Esri map servers, feature servers, and WMSs as well. In terms of exporting, we have a couple of different formats too. You can only export things that you draw or the analytics. So if you were to bring in zoning controls and you wanted to export some of them to a separate program, we don't allow that, largely because we don't control that layer. It's a federated data model. We bring it in. You would have to create a local copy of that data to export it. But if you're interested in exporting your drawing to 2D or 3D, we have quite a number of different feature format types that you can go to, including some normal sort of GIS ones, GeoJSON. But for 3D, we can export 3D drawings or meshes as well that can go into a number of things. And we also have a brand new app called IFC Export, which will take you to a Luke, what's the word? Like a BIM standard model. There's a specific word I'm looking for, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's the interoperable format to go out to that all BIM software should support.
Yeah. So yes, lots of options, Ravi. And again, our knowledge base has lots of documentation on how that works. And then maybe final question, because we're almost over, from Chrissy, what about photo mesh as a base with imagery? So with something like a mesh, we can bring in an Esri scene server, which will, and I know that Google and Apple and others are starting to play with these formats too. We can bring them in quite easily. And so you can start playing with a photo reality mesh that is usually floating up in the air at the correct elevation. You can give your drawings a base height as well, which will allow them to float up in the air at the correct elevation that you nominate as well. So there is quite a lot of different options. With other types of very basic imagery, we can connect to Nearmap or MetroMap APIs if you have tokens and all that sort of stuff. So we do have lots of options for sort of imagery visualizations and enriching your scene. You could also import a 3D model very easily as well. But if it's a mesh type, you can't edit it in Giraffe or quantify it, but you can absolutely visualize it, have it cast shadows, all that sort of good stuff. And thanks for the nice comment, Greg. Okay, so we might wrap there. I don't know, Luke or Jared, if you guys have any final comments.
No, nothing from me. Thanks, Lucy.
Cool.
Just to say
Awesome.
thanks everyone attending today, and yeah, like anything which we've shown today, if there's any further interest, we're happy to do a one-on-one demo or demo to teams, and we can talk about how we've applied some of these practices at different projects.
Yeah, just echo what Luke said. Thank you all for coming along. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Jared, for your time. Hope to chat to some of you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jared.
See you all.
Bye.